So today, let's talk about what is reality? Something we don't often think about, right? We're just born, we're running around, we're like, want food, kind of like the animals. Are the animals thinking about reality? No, the squirrel's thinking about squirrel food, the fish is thinking about fish food. Everything is just everything, every animal, every being is just doing its thing, working, reproducing, not thinking about reality. So why should we think about reality? So, like I said, we, like the animals, are going around experiencing reality. Are we experiencing the full reality? Of course not, right? We know that, you know, we all have, even within the humans, we have different ranges of sight and perception. And not to mention, like dogs have 10,000 times better smell than us. So they're picking up on what's out there. And I'm not necessarily saying reality is out there. We'll get there too. But for the sake of this, they're experiencing things that we can't experience or we're not commonly experiencing. But that's one thing we could all agree upon. Like if I say I saw that person, doesn't matter what language we speak, we all know what it means to see. We all know what it means to hear, unless we're blind, of course, right? So, like I said, even an animal, we know when a dog is looking at us. We know it sees us. So we understand that the senses are where we're taking in this information. But what is reality? What are we really seeing? Or what are we not seeing? What actually exists? So at the very fundamental level of your experience, we have thoughts, we have complicated abstract thoughts, we have desires, fetishes, we have all types of very complicated perceptions and mental experiences. But at the very, very foundation of it all, what is consciousness? Consciousness means that there is a knower and a known. Or you could also say a perceiver and a perceived. Or you can say an experiencer and experiences. So, when you eat a piece of chocolate, you know you're eating chocolate, right? There's the chocolate, which when you put it in your mouth, you perceive it. The actual chocolate touches your tongue. There's that place where the outer world and the inner world meet. That's the senses. So there's always this bifurcation, this dualistic experience of the inner and the outer. You hear your mother's voice or you see your mother's face. You know you're seeing your mother. As long as, you're not hallucinating or, if you actually see your mother's face, you're seeing it. So it requires two things. It requires your eyes and it requires your mother's face. If you didn't have your mother's face, but you had the eyes, you wouldn't have the experience of your mother's face. And if you didn't have the eyes, you also wouldn't have the experience of your mother's face. So it's the coming together of these two things which forms the basis of our experience. Divide that by the five senses, and now you have five different types of perceivers and five types of experience. But it really comes down to the experiencer and the experience. So it's pretty simple. So again, we have these two types of phenomena. Outer phenomena, which are things that could be heard, things that can be seen, things that can be tasted, touched, and smelt. Notice I didn't say that there are objects, there are rocks, because yes, there are these things that we call rocks, but really what it is something, if you want to look at it from, Newtonian physics, it's like light is reflecting off the rock, right? And certain colors are being reflected and then it hits our eye, our retina, and then we have this experience. But it's not like We're not seeing it and then we're seeing the word rock. We learn the word rock. And then we see that thing and we say that's a rock, and you know what it is because you learned the same word as me. But really it's an experience through the eyes. So we all have that experience. In the distance, you see a mailbox, but you think it's a person, right? So the first thing is you're like, oh, there's a person up in the distance. And then your mind says, oh, it looks like a woman. And then your mind just starts to create this story, or this, it starts to create this object. That's a woman. Then when you get closer, you realize it's a mailbox. And now the woman's gone. Where did she go? She was never there. So that not finding her is what we call in Buddhism emptiness. And it's the most important of the entire part of reality. No, I'm sorry, the part of the path of discovering reality is emptiness. Emptiness is not finding something. I'm sorry, it is not, this is hard to explain and it gets really fun. It's not finding something. It's not finding something. It's the not finding of something, which is what we're finding, which is what helps us see reality. Because the problem is not with our eyes or our ears. The problem is what we're doing with our minds. Like that example of the woman in the mailbox, you can say, is what we do all day long, every day, every single moment. But when we start to look and we notice that there's all these mailboxes and we're seeing the women in our life, in our beliefs, as we look at them, which we don't often do. That's why I say the word that why, asking why, which is really the basis of the scientific method, the basis of fancy words like epistemology and ontology, deductive reasoning. It all comes down to eliminating what is not there, eliminating what is not true, right? You watch the news, it's trying to tell you this is true. You go on Google, you go on Wikipedia, this is what this centipede, it's from this genus and this species, and it does this, and it does this, and it does, it's telling you what is, not telling you what's not. So when we look at things, we don't look at the spaces between things. But again, in Buddhism, the space, the emptiness is the key. So our mind is constantly filling in blanks when they don't need to be there. And of course, on the level of what we call seeming reality, conventional reality means you're talking to your mother, you're talking to normal people who are not on this path of getting out of the matrix. They're going to think you're crazy if you're talking about seeming reality and this doesn't exist, this is empty. For the sake of convention, we use these words so we can communicate with others. And that's what we call compassion too, because these people who are not on the path yet, they might need like a little bit of a seed to get planted for them to start waking up. And the only way to do that is to speak their language. So it's not like the goal is to just see reality, get out of the matrix, and then act like a crazy person, like, oh, everything's empty, nothing's real. No, that's for you. When you understand that and you see it for yourself, what is not there, what you've been projecting, what everybody's projecting, that's for you to, that's what the real meaning of sacredness, spirituality, that's the real meaning of spirituality. It's not, oh, I got blessed by this guru, so now I'm spiritual. No, it's seeing the illusion for what it is awakening, is enlightenment, is spiritual, if you want to use that word. So the whole Buddhist path, like I said, when I said today we're going to really get started or get to really what Buddhism is about and why it's so fundamentally different from even Hinduism. Buddha grew up in a Hindu, they didn't even call it Hindu back then, a Vedic society. But Buddhism is so different from Vedic society, so different from Judaism, so different from Christianity, so different from atheism. It is so different from all of them because it's not even in the same category. So I don't like the word religion, because what does religion even mean? Like Jews and Christians and Muslims and atheists, or they don't call themselves religion, but it's completely different. So, but again, not everybody's on this path. So we have to understand that you guys showed up here, and that's why you're listening. That's because you're interested. Most people are not. They get caught up in the word. Oh, Buddhism is a religion. I like all religions. All religions are equal. No, Buddhism is not. I don't even like the word Buddhism. The Buddhist teaching is about deconstructing, getting rid of what is not there. Okay, Buddha is not like, oh, the son of Mary and the father of Joseph, and they went to Egypt. There's none of that. There's none of that. It's like, what are you seeing, and why is it important? Who cares about seeing reality? We'll get to that too. So the whole Buddhist path is a process of deconstructing the outer world and the inner world. So I said the outer world is is 5 appearances. The eyes, the visuals, sounds, tastes, touches. And we could even, I'll give you a little sneak preview. This won't be covered today, but as you go deeper, you start to question, well, if we're in a matrix, right? Like Neo in the Matrix, they're not actually seeing anything outside of them. They're seeing something outside of them. They're experiencing outer objects and tastes. But all of that is happening within their brain, which is inside the whole matrix thing. Like nothing is on the outside at all. So the Buddha, the matrix didn't come up with that idea called philosophical idealism, where there is nothing but mind. This is an ancient concept going back to the Greeks, and obviously the Buddha talked about it. The inner self, which we're just deconstructing, is the experiences, the feelings, the perceptions, the thoughts. So we're looking at the outer stuff and we're seeing what's real, what's the mailbox, and what's the woman. Then we're looking inside at our own mental processes, and they are so complex. Even if you think about it again on a Newtonian physics level, to play baseball, to do anything, just to walk, to drive, to have all 5 senses coordinated in the same time, to take in 5 pieces of data constantly and give you this perception of like, oh, I'm driving my car, and being able to react is incredibly complicated. But there's even more layers going on. We talk about the subconscious mind, right? Again, where do our thoughts come from? I talked about this like before. Where are our thoughts coming from? So our mind is the closest thing to us, and it's what we spend the least time in our culture studying, thinking about, when it's the most important thing, obviously. So why do we care about the truth? Or I should say, why do we care about what is reality? According to most people, the truth is miserable, right? We're going to die. Don't think about death. Just have fun while you're here. Do the best you can while you're here. Ignorance is bliss, right? Just think positive. You have people who say so there's 2 camps. There's the one camp of people who are like, just think positive and only see the good in everything. And then there's other people who are just doubting everything, right? Like, if I haven't seen it, it can't be true. If there was really a Buddha, or if there was really these higher beings or these higher states of consciousness, it would be on TV. They'd be talking about it. If there was really a cure for cancer, it would be on TV. There's those type of people. If I haven't seen it, it's not true. They're like the naysayers. So you have the people who are fantasizers, who are just making things that aren't there real. And then you have the people who are doubting everything. So why do we care? Again, so the Buddha, again, unlike most people, I mean, you could almost say like a scientist, Buddha said the key to real happiness, to true liberation from suffering, to actually doing something meaningful with our life and actually making a lasting impact on others, all comes down to one thing, which is seeing reality as clearly as possible. If you can do that, you can do everything better. It is the number one most important thing. And the Buddha praised generosity to a degree that most people can't even fathom. You know, in the past life, the Buddha gave up his body to these tigers. This tiger had these hungry babies. So in a previous life, the Buddha was a prince. He just gave his body, here, just give me, just eat me, you know? So that the Buddha praised generosity, praised discipline, praised patience and forgiveness, like more than you read about in the Gospels, you know? The Buddha was incredibly praising patience. He praised doing, you know, like working hard, being passionate about doing good, celebrating other people's victories, the opposite of our animalistic instincts. And also the Buddha praised meditation, achieving all of the jhanas, not just, oh, I meditate. The Buddha was like, go to the jhanas, go to these higher levels of consciousness, experience intelligence, contact beings from higher dimensions, do all of that. But he praised even higher than all of that put together, seeing reality for what it is. In fact, those 5 previous things I mentioned, generosity, discipline, patience, or forgiveness, vigor, enthusiasm, and meditation, all 5 of those lead you to seeing reality. So it's very interesting. Like when we're being generous, we're not really doing it for ourselves. When you're being generous, the generosity removes the greediness inside of us, and that greediness is keeping us from seeing reality. So again, everything the Buddha taught comes down to seeing reality. Even like everybody's like, oh yeah, be good, be nice to people. It's very nice to be nice. It is nice to feel, it does feel good to be nice. But the Buddha was going way deeper than that. He's saying be nice to other people because it's going to help you see reality. And when you see reality, you're going to experience a happiness you couldn't even imagine, and also be able to help others achieve that as well. So being generous now will lead you to really being generous in the future. Okay, so that was the whole setup. So how do we actually see reality? So the brilliant thing about this, about the Buddha's teaching, is he set up a step-by-step path of starting here and peeling away layer after layer after layer after layer until you get to the end. He mapped the entire thing out. So everyone's like, okay, so let me just go right down to the bottom layer. Let me just tell me the truth. That's what everybody wants, but it doesn't work that way. In order to go to the next level, right? If you're a white belt, you have to go to the yellow belt, right? And if you're in martial arts, and then you get the black belt at the end. You can't just do the black belt part. You have to see each layer. You have to see all the women that you're projecting onto the mailbox. You have to see clearly. Again, you're not looking to see something. You're looking to see emptiness. Emptiness is something that your mind is doing that's not real. And when you see it, and it literally happens in a moment, less than a second, that's what we call a clear realization. When something comes up, when you train your mind, and the Buddha, again, gives you the instructions. It's like baking a cake. Do this, do this, do this, do this, and then look what happens. And when you do all those steps and you look and you're like, oh yeah, that's not there. That's the breakthrough moment. When you see the Buddha sets you up to do an experiment. Okay. For example, this rock. That's a rock. For most people, it's a rock. But for a scientist, or I should say, a Western Newtonian material scientist, they don't just look at it as a rock. They're like, okay, it's made up of atoms. So that's a level deeper of reality. Like, there's really no rock. There's a whole bunch of pieces that came together over time that form this rock. But the rock doesn't think it's a rock. The rock is just a bunch of parts. we project the rock and the word rock. I'll get to that in a moment, how words are so fascinating, words. And it's so important to look at our language forming part of our mind is really the key to this, of unraveling this whole process. Because notice, animals don't speak words. So they don't get themselves in the mess we get into. Animals don't kill each other over different belief systems, over different politics. They kill each other because they're hungry and they just want to eat and survive. And eat and reproduce. That's all they want to do, survive and reproduce. Whereas with us, because we have language, we create this whole world, which is, it's also why we became we're so dominant over animals, but it's also the key to getting out of the matrix. You know, there's arguments, but for the most part, animals cannot follow this path. The animals can't get out of the matrix. At the best, the matrix the Buddha described. At best, animals can hope to be reborn as a human, and then in that human life, they can get on the path, learn language, and then deconstruct it. So it's almost like you have to almost like the language is almost like a poison, but you need to use the poison to really cure yourself in a deep way. What's the word? Hormesis. And here's the thing. The Buddha laid out this path, layer after layer. So if you want to break it into two main layers, there's what we call personal or selfless, the two identitylessnesses, which is another way of saying emptinesses. One is the identitylessness of persons, and the other one is the identitylessness of all phenomena. So yeah, so those are the two main categories, but there's many subcategories. The cool thing is, remember, once you see that the mailbox is a mailbox and not a woman, you'll never go back. You cannot even make your mind believe it's a woman anymore. Once you see it's a mailbox, that's it. It's done. You cannot see it as a woman anymore. You can, if you're really good at like self-hypnosis, maybe you could do it, but it's impossible. You saw it for what it is. There's no going back. The Buddha said the same thing. The Buddhist path is the same thing. When you see what is not there, when you have that moment, that breakthrough moment, there's no going back. When you see there's no such thing as persons, and there's no identity in persons, there's no identity in phenomena, you can never go back. You see it, you're done forever, but you're also very glad. No Buddhas come back unhappy. Oh no, I wish I didn't see reality. I wish I didn't see emptiness. No, they're traveling to like infinite universe, like simulations. They're doing great things as a result of seeing reality. So it's all of these delusions brought about by language and culture that go on for many lifetimes. We carry with us this through many lifetimes. That is actually keeping us. So that you might have heard this expression, you know, we're not physical beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. The spirit world, or we don't call it spirit world in Buddhism, but like the world of the true reality, the ultimate reality, let's just say the spirit world. The spirit world is real. This world, the matrix, is not real. So it's not like we start here. Most people treat spirituality, especially like the Jews, the Christians, it's like, oh, like I gotta die and go to heaven. It's like, what? It's like, that's just your body. The spirit world, heaven is reality. Earth is the illusion. Earth is the matrix. Heaven is what already is. So there's no getting to heaven in Buddhism. There is getting rid of the attachment to the matrix to where you find yourself where you've always been and always will be. And once you're there, there's no more, according to the Buddha, there's no more of the suffering and no more of the limitation. In this world, in the Matrix, I only can know what's going on in my head. In the real world, I could know anything going on anywhere. But that's after you get there, according to the Buddha. So these aha moments, these breakthroughs, there's no going back from them. So we're going to start with the first layer, right? We're going to start with the first layer because it gets crazy. It gets so crazy. And again, if you have the karmic seeds from your past lives, which I think whoever's listening to this does to a degree, if you made it this far, we say, like, we start to look at things like, like a seed. You plant the seed, it becomes a sprout, right? So that's common sense. Conventionally, you say, yeah, a seed becomes a sprout becomes a plant becomes a fruit, and then we get the seed again. But when you really look at that reality with the trained mind, with the trained wisdom, you realize it's impossible for a seed to become a sprout. Because when did the seed touch the sprout? When did the cause touch the result? Because if you keep breaking down time slower and slower, there's no actual point where there's a seed and there's no actual point where there's a sprout. There's just this continuation. At no point was there ever a seed, was there ever a sprout. But I shouldn't have jumped down that far. Let's start with the first layer. So let's talk about names. I mentioned language and naming. So when you hear the name Donald Trump, right? One of the most triggering words ever, right? So we associate it with a person who's the 47th president of America and has orange skin, right? He's a funny guy. So right now, I can't see Donald Trump. You can't see Donald Trump. We're not looking at him, right? So what the image that comes to mind when I say Donald Trump is what we call a general phenomena, or general categorized phenomena. But what it really means is it's like the way our mind, like the Buddha really understood memory. The way our minds store things is it takes a name, like it literally stores it like your computer, like in a file, like not in your brain, by the way, but in your mind. And here's a name, it pulls up the file and then opens up that file. Oh, and like he's got orange skin, he was a president, and then there's all these other things like emotions. I hate him, I love him, he's going to save America, he's destroying America. Like all these things are in that file. So, but we need a word. Without the word, there's no file. So when we're a baby, what are our parents doing? Like, that's a pot. That's a pot. And they say it over and over again until you say pot, pot. And this process is what starts the way we see reality. Now, the Buddhists, in Tibet, they would have these monks going around to remote villages dressed up not as monks, pretending to be just travelers, going into villages to inspect the children, to see if any of the children exhibited unique personalities. And then if they found them, they would take them, to do some deeper testing. And if they pass the test, and then the high lamas, like the Karmapa, the Dalai Lama, would say, this is a reincarnation of this person. So then that person would be taken to the monastery that they were in their last life, and they would be taught, as they're learning language, to not associate the words with the thing. So they're taught this at a very young age. That's why You know, that's how that would be great. So if we have children, you know, that's a good way. Instead of saying this is pot, this is pot, you could just say this is called a pot. We call this pot, not this is pot. We call this pot. We use the word in English, pot, but pot is just a name that represents this thing that serves the function of holding water so we can cook it. Sounds like a lot, but that's that's that will help us from getting you know, attached. So now let's just take a look at Donald Trump, right? So Trump has a body. There's a physical appearance of Donald Trump, right? And most of us have only seen him and heard him, not even in real life, only through TV, only through, you know, through video and sound. We've never smelt him, right? Like if we met him in person, we get him even more of an idea of him. But so there's Trump's body, there's what he's physical parts, but then there's his mind. When people hate Trump or love Trump, it's not about his body, right? It's about his mind. So as we can see, there's more than one part to a person. It's not just like a body. It's not just like there's one thing. Like, but that's how, again, trying to show how deceptive, how our mind fills in these blanks, how we have this thing where it's like Donald Trump, I hate Donald Trump. But there is no Donald Trump. There's a physical body. And I wouldn't even say there's a mind, because even the mind, if you look at it, the Buddha taught, there's 4 aggregates. There's thoughts, there's feelings, there's intentions, and then there's Trump's awareness, his attention. So even the mind is made up of many different pieces, but we just say Trump, one thing, Donald Trump. I hate him. He's evil. It's like, so, and we do this to everybody. We do this to everybody. I like this person. I don't like this person, but there is no person. There's a body and then there's a mind. But let's just look at the body. There's no body. The body is a collection of cells, trillions of cells. And guess what? Most of those cells are not even human. They're bacteria. They're microbiome. So there's no body. There's no body, right? There is many different cells. Each one of those cells has its own life. You could take a cell out of my body, put it in a test tube, it'll go look for food. That cell exists independent of me. So Donald Trump is made up of all these cells. So if you hate Donald Trump, which cell are you talking about? Right? There's all these different cells. Do you hate his microbiome? And we know that even our mind is influenced by our microbiome. So where is the person? It's like, it's the same idea with the mailbox and the woman. Donald Trump is the woman. But if you take away the word and this image of Donald Trump, and you actually look at it, there's bones and there's cells, and that's just the physical part. But then there's the mental part. Then there's like his childhood, his emotions. Why is he the way he is? What is he really thinking? We don't know what he's thinking. We just see clips. But it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel that way. We feel like we know him, or we feel like we know a celebrity. And then we find out, oh my God, this person was doing this and they were horrible and this and that, you know? So it's just, so this is the first layer of many layers of the onion, is what we call mixing the name with the referent. Name and referent. The referent is the appearance to our eyes, the sounds that come to our ears, you know, the taste, the smells. You know, so when we say like, oh, I don't like apples, what people really mean is they don't like the taste of apple. They don't like the texture of apple or whatever, you know? So, so we're just looking now at this layer of mixing words with reference. And then just to take it one step further, there is this, we talked about cells of Trump's body, but even the cells are made up of parts. They're made up of organelles. And we know, again, you take a mitochondria, the mitochondria can kind of exist on its own. So we have mitochondria in all our cells, and they're technically not us. They're technically their own thing. So where is our body? The body is not there. There's no body. There is, now we know that the body is made up of mostly 4 atoms. Like I think 75 or even 80, 90% of our body is like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and something else, right? Nitrogen. So where, like, if you just start to look at the parts, there's no body, there's no cell. Even when you look at the atom, it's mostly empty space, right? Between the electron and the proton, the nucleus of an atom is mostly empty space. So again, the point right now is not to be in a place of like, oh yeah, it's mostly empty space. Now I know that. No, the whole point is to stay in a state of wonder, a state of curiosity, and be like, yeah, that is interesting. We're made up of cells. To constantly remind yourself, whenever you're with a person, to remind yourself, well, this person is not, there is no person. This person has a mind, this person has a body. Their mind has many parts, their body has many parts. So it's just a matter of catching ourselves. When we start, whenever we get emotionally charged about a person, it's good to remind ourselves there is no person. Where is the person? I'm mad at you. I'm mad at Bob. I'm mad at my mother. It's good to remind ourselves that you're mad at an illusion. There's a bunch of cells that have come together. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely mind-bogglingly miraculous. One cell becomes a trillion cells with all these organs, all encoded in the DNA, supposedly. And just the fact that any of that happens is a miracle. But when we just say that's Bob, we take away the whole miracle. The miracle is that there's all of these things happening around the clock. When you're sleeping, your cells are not sleeping. Your cells are still selling and eating and producing and sharing, constantly 3D printing amino acids to create proteins to repair your body 24/7. But when you just say this person, or that person, you're missing the real miracle that's right in front of you. A person is a miracle. A cat is a miracle. A cat is made up of cells. So so you see how emptiness, we barely touched on it, but emptiness really just opens up miracles in each moment. Not looking, oh, I got to go on a retreat. I got to go to India, the dirtiest country in the world. I mean, I love it because, a lot of my teachers are there, but there's nothing special about India. There's nothing special about anything. It's all special. When nothing is special, everything is special. And the key to everything is emptiness. The key to everything is just, our mind wants to make things so simple. Oh, that's Bob. That's Donald Trump. But when you have emptiness, you don't see Donald Trump. You see all the cells and the atoms, right? You see the code in the matrix. You see that everything is systems, not things, processes, not things, not people. But yet people are special. Okay, so it doesn't mean, this is like the paradox, and why, as we go deeper into the layers, the layers, they still have their purpose. For the sake of how karma plays out, seeing people as people is important, right? Like when I do something, I create the karma, not my cells. So there is something to the person. It functions, but it's not there. It's very paradoxical. But so I think I'll kind of wrap it up right there. Like I said, there's many. Well, I'll go one step deeper. So you got these parts, right? So the Buddha taught that he didn't talk about, the 100 something elements of the periodic table. He said there's 4 elements: earth particles, water particles, fire particles, and air particles, and then there's space. So that's all of the material world is made up of 4 elements and space. And these elements, actually, these atoms, each atom contain all 4 elements in them. It's just that in something like a rock, the earth element has become more manifest. In something that's liquid, the water element has become more manifest. And these elements are connected all throughout space. And mind, consciousness, is what creates the system of my body. The mind is what makes that single cell turn into those trillions of cells. It's the mind that causes, mind and karma is what cause things, these particles, to stick together. And if you go down to the deepest level, there's different, again, this going back 2,000 years, there's so many different takes on it, but it's fun to learn all the different takes. But some say that all these little particles are touching each other. Each one of them is surrounded by like 6, like a beehive, but like 3-dimensionally. So like they're all these particles are touching, and then karma causes the earth to come out and the water to come out. And then you have mind. So in this view, this you can say maybe the second layer of the onion, there's particles, and then there's mental moments of consciousness, and moments of configurations of material particles. And from this point of view, emptiness or freedom or the purpose of this path, the people who subscribe to this path were called the Vaibhashikas, which means the people who believe in atoms. And they actually were people, but from the point of view of the path, we learn about all these people. We don't care about them as people. We care about that these are layers of the onion. So the first layer that they peeled away was, again, the idea that there is these Donald Trumps and tigers. They were like, no, everything is just atoms. So if you could learn to see things as atoms, then you become free, right? But I'll just go one more step deeper. So the next group of people, they asked a question. Again, let's peel it away deeper, because every group or every one of these thought experiments, they're peeling away a layer. So the next layer is like, okay, wait a minute. You say there's these particles, but how do we know that? All we know is our mind. All we know is consciousness. So we see things outside of us. Yes, there are particles, but the particles hit our senses, and our senses create the image in our mind. So there's a step in that process. So therefore, it becomes a little bit fuzzy on what really exists on the outside. Because the layer after this that we're going to peel away says there's nothing on the outside. We're just minds in a matrix. So before we get to that, so that's the third. That's like the fourth, let's say. That's the fourth. The 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 first is like words and reference are not the same thing. So I think that's pretty easy to understand for an intelligent person that, sometimes you ask someone, well, someone's like, well, I love this person. Okay, what do you mean by love? What do you mean? What do you mean what I mean by love? I love them. That's all I mean. It's like, no, but love is just a word. It doesn't mean anything. It's like, it's all about how you define it. So some people can't even get past the first layer. Like words are words. Like, that's it. What do you mean? This is a table. That's it. Stop confusing me. They don't speak if you speak two different languages, learning another language is a great way to get past the first level, peel away the first level. Because when you realize something is two different words in two different languages, it automatically kind of gives you that emptiness. Like, oh, this is not a table. This is like, in Spanish, it's mesa, so it's like, so the first layer is removing this association with the word and the referent. The second layer is realizing that that everything is made up of parts, right? The third layer is like, yes, everything is kind of made up of parts, but we can't actually see those parts. The only reason why we know there's parts out there is because our mind is constructing it. That's the third layer. So I just was excited to share that because so we'll continue next time. We'll talk about the next layer after that. I'll go over that previous layer too, but I'll go even deeper into the really exciting layer, which brings us to the Matrix movie, which is, how do we know that we're not in a matrix? What could we do? I want you to think about this. What could we do to know for sure that we weren't in a matrix? Because people are like, well, I can touch this table. I feel the table. They could feel tables in the matrix. It doesn't mean, it's just, the question is, there's no doubt about experience. You're experiencing touching the table. Just like in a dream, you experience touching a table. You experience pain and love in a dream, but then you wake up and you realize that wasn't real. I mean, it was real in the sense that you experienced it, you touched the table, but what was not real about it? Well, what is not real about a dream is that there's no external material, no external atoms, particles that are required for you to have those images in your dream. So when we wake up from this dream, how do we know we're not still in a dream? And this is how fun this is. And again, emptiness, each time you ask these questions, and despite the way things appear, and despite the fact that 99 out of 100 people will tell you you're crazy, and you have to be careful. When the Buddha taught this, what are called the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the emptiness teachings, there were people who got up and left right away. Like, they were great Buddhist students who loved when he's talking about the particles and he's talking about the words are not the reference. And he talked about, go and meditate on the jhanas. They loved it. When he started talking about emptiness, they got up and left. Millions of like gods and all types of beings. But then other ones actually had heart attacks and died on the spot. They heard these teachings and then died. There's a great, Carl Broomholzel is like the greatest Buddhist translator. And he has a book called the Heart Attack Sutra, which is a joke because it's called the Heart Sutra. Is when the Buddha talked about this. He says, there is no eye, there is no ear, there's no hearing, there's no Buddha, there's no path to liberation, but there's also no not path. There's no I, but there's no not I. There's emptiness, but there's also not emptiness. When he starts talking like that, it was called the Heart Sutra. And so Carl Broomholzel has a book called the Heart Attack Sutra because people actually had heart attacks. And that Heart Sutra addresses the deepest level, which it's removing even, like, remember how I said there was, on the basic level, there's a subject and an object, there's a perceiver and a perceived, there's an experiencer and an experienced. The Heart Sutra, the Prajnaparamita teachings say there actually isn't even a perceiver and a perceived. That's empty. So what's on the other side of that? That's a deep question. But again, it caused some people to have these teachings can make you crazy if you're not ready for them. And that's why it's super important to balance these very powerful teachings with what we call compassion. Because if you're just going deep into this, like a lot of occultists, they're going into reality, they go crazy. But if you're constantly balancing it with generosity, with, like, if your motivation for doing this is to help beings, you won't go crazy. So that's why it's very important to balance bodhicitta, the heart of enlightenment, meaning that this whole path, and believe me, it's the most, well, don't believe me, sorry. I can't believe I just said that. Test and see for yourself, like I did, that when these teachings are the most rewarding experiences you could possibly have. But and be grateful for them, but always remember and that your motivation, that the motivation should be to help others with them, because for your own sake. Because when you start going deep into emptiness, it's called heat. There's 4 levels before you get to directly experiencing emptiness. One's called heat, one's called peak, one's called poised readiness, and one's called supreme dharma. And each one of those are big breakthrough experiences. So the first one's called heat, because when this starts to click, when this, I could remember when it happened to me, when this starts to kick in and you start to understand this stuff, it's like you start to feel like on fire. You start to feel like this is the most craziest thing. How is this possible? How is everything empty? How is it that nobody sees this? This is like the most important thing to see, and nobody sees it. And it's not even seeing. It's, remember, it's seeing that something is not there. And it's so hard to explain that to people. But remember, for your own sake, that all of the great Buddhas of all of time, and there's, they're always talking about compassion, because compassion and love, it keeps us kind of grounded. Because that's what I was going to say. So when you're doing these deep meditations on emptiness, you're like, oh my God, then it's good to go out and go around, quote unquote, normal people who are, watching TV, because that will ground you. That will ground you and and it will help you develop compassion, but it will also make you want to go back to the emptiness. Like, holy, let me go deeper, because these people are crazy. Like they're running around in circles, not even knowing why they're doing anything. They're not questioning anything. So, yeah, on that note, thank you very much.